It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That's Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. It is a tape review Tuesday as we record. Many of you hearing this on Wednesday. And Logan, we're reviewing the tape from Sunday, specifically the passing tape. We'll get to the defense in a little bit. But when you look at this game now with the context of the All-22, having seen what Jacoby faced versus what Sam faced, how the two quarterbacks performed, the offensive lines in front of those quarterbacks, which were different O-lines, by the way.
Yeah.
With Nick Gates coming in and Cornelius Lucas coming in around the same time that Jacoby was subbed in for varying reasons. Do you have any more distinctive thoughts on how things went on Sunday and trying to make sense of the two performances?
Yeah, so I think, obviously in the post game, we were kind of like, oh no, what does this mean? Like, is Jacoby really good? And I think like it, to give credit to Jacoby, I think he did some really good stuff. I think it shows like his level of experience. It shows his confidence in the offense. It shows he's played a lot of football. And I think that's something that stood out to me is like he was getting like a lot of one lurk. So like man coverage where it's like a two safety look and they're going to rotate one in the middle of the field. And the other guy's kind of robbing the 3-by-1 coming across. And Jacoby, or it could have been 6, like 6 where it's like a quarters player and he's matching the third side or the 3 receiver side. But Jacoby is just like, oh, like I know this coverage. I'm going to like look this guy over here. He's going to delay and I'm going to throw 2 touchdowns to Terry. So like I think just understanding the coverage, staying in the pocket, being patient in the pocket was just a huge benefit for Jacoby. Now, I do think it's important to note that while Jacoby was very patient, I thought Sam did some good things as well. I think it's so hard to compare the two of them because one dude has played a lot of football, has been mentored by some of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. and you see his process, right? He holds the football a long time. Jacoby holds the football a long time, but he's holding it for a reason. Like he's holding it to kind of develop stuff. And there's times where I see Sam holding the football and I'm like, he doesn't see it or he doesn't feel it or he's feeling the rush too much. And I think it's so hard for me to be hypercritical of that guy because he does good. There's other aspects that are excellent, but it's also like he's new, and like he doesn't have the foundation of football knowledge and football experience that Jacoby does. So, it's kind of the same comparison we were running into during training camp where it's like Jacoby understands the protection a little bit better. He understands where the ball should go in the context of the coverage a little bit better, but Sam's upside's probably a little bit higher. And I still, after watching this game, feel that way. It's just Sam's got to learn and grow in a way that Jacoby's already done. Like, what is this for Jacoby? This is year like 8 for him, 9, something like that. He's been around the block, man. And, I can speak from experience. The longer I was in the league, the mental stuff became way easier. The physical stuff got harder for me, but the mental stuff gets way easier. And I definitely, in watching it, felt that way with Jacoby. And I think in addition to some of the nuanced stuff he's doing with his head movement, his eye movement, his pocket presence, I also think he understood kind of, hey, man, we're getting man coverage. Like, I can throw this out. And this is NFL open, this out to Jahan, this comeback in the slot to Curtis, because I think Sam had a couple opportunities to do something similar. Now, the pocket was a little bit different. But I think you see kind of just the difference in understanding of what NFL defenses present.
Yeah, and I think like to kind of set the ground rules almost here, like I think we can talk about this stuff without it being critical, right? And like there's like a cold hard evaluation of like a scouting process that kind of I think is the most interesting thing here of like, okay, well, what is it without, I don't want to say without context, but without like the emotional pull of all of it, which is hard because we're all fans as well. And, we're always doing we're fans, but we're also pundits. Like we're projecting at all times. Like, what does it mean for like, what would this season have looked like if Jacoby was the quarterback? What does this mean for Sam moving forward? Do they need to draft like we're doing all that stuff. But what I think is really insightful and making those opinions not stupid is like, what is it right now? And like, what are the things that Sam did Sunday or didn't do? And then putting them in the context of the season, his trajectory, because Logan, I don't ever really plan rants on the radio. Sometimes they just happen. Like there's sometimes when I'm legitimately upset about something, when Monumental moves the Wizards out of DC, like that was real anger where I'm like, this is ridiculous. And obviously I know at that point I'm probably going to go on something that will be classified by the people who type it up and put it on the internet as a rant. But I kind of found myself mid-rant yesterday during 1st and 10 talking about how they're handling everything this season from the offensive side. And it wasn't like there is some blame. I don't really know where it goes because there's so many different factors that go into it. But the point was, like, this plan for Sam Howell was terrible. And it wasn't, and the reason I use the word terrible is I would either want something that really helps develop and incubate a quarterback, or something that's going to win me games. And I feel like the way that they've called this season and the way that they've organized this season is not really accomplishing either. And I think that it took a long time for people to kind of get on board with the, hey, this isn't an optimal way to develop a quarterback side of that, where you kind of put so much on his plate. And the thought, and Ron said this isn't me like making assumptions, like Ron talked about this, is like, we're passing the ball more than maybe we otherwise might, because we think that Sam seeing this stuff is going to pay off in the long term, and that eventually he's going to turn a corner. And I think what we've seen, and this is kind of where I'm leading to the question, like after watching the tape, is I feel like when you watch the game on TV and you watch how this has played out the last couple of weeks, it feels like that has not been the case, that it's actually overwhelmed him. And it's like trying to ask a kid to learn how to ride a bike without training wheels, and that all the kid's going to do is fall. He's not actually learning anything. He's just going to fall. And I feel like that culminated, like that point culminated, I guess it could get worse, so maybe there's more peak or valley, if you will, to come. But it culminated on Sunday, where it just felt like nothing was on schedule, nothing was in rhythm. He doesn't see the stuff. It feels like he's going through some motions that he knows he's supposed to do, but then you see Brissett go through some of the same stuff, holding the ball for a purpose, moving it defenders with his eyes, some of that stuff that we wanted to see Sam have, and we see how it can work, and that this actually hasn't been a good thing for Sam. I know there's a lot there, but when we talk about like the development and kind of that idea of Sam learning to ride a bike without training wheels, like, do you see some of that falling, if you will, on Sunday?
I mean, that's a good question. And it's hard to say like definitively yes or no. Like, let's just go to the film. And I think like the film is something that I always kind of go back to. And I think like there's the second 1st and 10 of the game. So it's the second drive. Like they're running what I would call like double arrow. So it's a 3x1, backs offset to the 3x1, 3x1's to the right. They're running like 2 sit routes and a corner. Okay. And then they're going to put the back in the flat to that same side. And so what you're doing there is like, if it's cover 2, like those 2 sits are going to hold the underneath coverage. You're going to get that corner running on the half safety, and you're going to have a nice big window to throw that corner. And so what the defense is presenting in that is that it looks like a 2 shell. It looks like a cover 2 look. And I think Sam is like, okay, like I'm going to throw this. This is what the concept's in for. We're going to hit this concept. It's going to be great. And it's even pretty good versus cover 3, right? Because you know, if it's cover 3, you kind of match all those underneath players with the sits, and you hit the ball, the back to the flat. And it looks like cover 2. They kind of stem out of it. It ends up being more of like a kind of like a single high kind of matchy weird thing, right? It doesn't look good. They bring a simulated pressure, so basically stuff that we've been seeing all season, or the team's been seeing all season, and Sam gets the ball out really quick to the back and the flat. Great. Like if you're just looking at that concept, got pressure, get it to your hot read, ends up almost being a first down. Great. The problem is, I think, like with him, and you mentioned like the training wheels, for example, is on the backside of this concept, and John Keim pointed this out to me, so shout out John Keim, is Terry wins a one-on-one. And because of how the coverage is working, it starts in this 2 shell look, but the backside safety is matching the 4 receiver side, essentially leaving that backside corner who's on Terry like on an island in a one-on-one situation. Okay. So obviously you want to alert Terry in this situation if it is true one-on-one. The problem is, and this is where like the training wheels and the experience come into play, right? Is I don't think Sam even recognizes that it's not cover 2 until the ball is snapped, right? And so take that play, and you miss this explosive play opportunity to Terry, because Terry wins. He's got like 3 yards of separation. The ball should go there. So I think about it as a coach. Like if I was coaching this, like I want Sam to work the front side concept, which is like double sit or double spot, we'll call it, for just vernacular purposes. And he does the right thing. He gets pressure, gets the ball out. And so then I was thinking, like, how would you coach that? Because you don't want to miss this opportunity to Terry, right? And so you say, hey, man, just remember, if you see this coverage, if you see this backside safety doing this, I want to alert Terry on this. And so I'm sure after this play, they alert him to that. And then later in the game, it's a very similar structure. It's 3-by-1. It's to the left this time. Terry's to the right. And it looks like cover 1. So I'm sure Sam's like, okay, well, I'm going to throw it to Terry now. And they stem to cover 2, and he almost throws a pick, right?
That's the one that the one defender knocks it out
of the other defender's hands.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, to me, that's tough sledding, man, against defenses now. And again, like, everyone's talking about the defensive resurgence and how defense is fighting back. To me, it's not even the defense is fighting back. You're just getting players who haven't seen as much coverage structure playing more football. Like, more young quarterbacks are playing than ever before. And this is one of the byproducts. Because Jacoby gets out there. And now I will say the motivation for the Rams when Jacoby was in was completely different. They're like trying to preserve the win. It's a little bit like it's a little bit conservative. Like, Aaron Donald's not in. Their foot's off the gas. But Jacoby's like, I know the coverage and I'm going to dice your ass. And that's what he does. And I think if Sam can identify the coverage, he'd be okay. But if you look at the sequence of plays, he's getting something that looks like cover 6, something that looks like lurk, something that looks like 2, something that looks like man. And you can tell he's a little bit unsure. And then you couple that with some opportunities, like the next play after that, and maybe not the directly next play, but one of the next plays in the sequence, next pass play, for example, they run a play action pass and they're running a dig. And Terry is wide open on the dig, but Sam is a little bit antsy in the pocket, vacates the pocket, and he does run for a first down. But I'm also like, throw this ball, man. This is a good pocket. It's a clean pocket. It's drop 8. There's only 3 guys rushing. Take a beat and throw this football. And I think, someone said, is he a little bit skittish because he's been hit so much? And to me, that's an example of maybe being a little bit skittish, not understanding the situation. It's drop 8. You don't need to be in a hurry here. See your throw. Understand the space. The space is open. The play action pass worked. There's guys all near the line of scrimmage. Throw this football. And so I think that's the kind of stuff when you look at Sam in this game that he has not been good at this year, really. And they've been able to insulate a little bit, through concept, through scheme, kind of, I think back to earlier in the season when teams weren't matching these concepts so well, and dudes are definitively open. Now I've got to be I got to play better above the neck a little bit, and I got to be a little bit smarter. Like, there was another play where they're running sail. And so sail is like an inside stem to a corner. So it makes it look like you're running like a go, basically. And you're going to stem out to the corner. Outside guy's got to go. And then you're going to run a bubble to the same side. It's a little bit muddy. They're in like a 6, like a cover 6. So quarters to the left of the formation, and then cover 2 to the right of the formation. And to the cover 2 side, the corner plays like a carry technique. So he gets some depth. So he's kind of clouding the corner window. But also, if you understand the coverage, you could deliver a dot there, I think, in between the 2 coverage players, especially if Curtis gets friendly to the football. So there's one where it's like you have the ability to make this throw. The window's a little bit tighter than you want, but you still can make this play. And also, like, just being on the same page with the receiver, because you see Travis Kelce run this play. I went back and watched some Kansas City film this week too, because the Jets played them earlier in the year, so kind of getting the Jets prep going. Yeah, and though that play where Travis Kelce sees that carry 2 corner and then comes flat is a completed pass, and that's, again, the experience of the receiver. That's the experience of the quarterback. But to me, like, that's what you're starting to see now is teams kind of figured out what you're doing. They're playing more comprehensive coverage structures. Sam has to identify those. He has to make tougher throws. He's got to be more patient in the pocket. And all of those things are things that young quarterbacks have a hard time with. And I think that's what you're seeing from him. So in terms of regression, is it Sam, or is it just the defense kind of saying, okay, like, we're better at matching what you're presenting?
Right. So if it's regression, it's actually stagnation. And in like, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards kind of mentality, right? Like, if he's not really growing, and this is kind of my training wheels thing, is like, how do you get him off the training wheels to the point where at least you're holding the bike and you're like, hey, you're doing it as your hands lightly on the bike so your kid doesn't fall over. And then eventually you get him on a real bike and trust him to go out there and drive around the cul-de-sac or whatever kids do biking these days, depending on where you live.
To that point, just real quick, it's something, because again, when I went and watched Kansas City, I was expecting to see something that was very analogous to what the team's been running here. And, because we talk about training wheels, and I see an offense that is presenting different formations, is presenting different kind of run concepts, way more RPO, kind of things to deleverage Patrick Mahomes. And again, Patrick Mahomes elevates concept. Travis Kelce elevates concepts. Watching those guys is crazy the way they work together. But I also think there's an element of that too. It's you've got this guy just out there, just leveraged as far as possible. And that I think is also something that I look at. I'm like, man, this doesn't seem like the best, to your point, the best way to maximize his development, so.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I had an interaction. I think it was a YouTube comment. It might've been someone on Twitter yesterday where they were like, you can't unleverage the quarterback, basically, where it was every system is quarterback centric. You eventually have to play NFL quarterback. And I was like, yes, but there are ways to make it easier. And I, of course, used a Kyle example because I think it's the best one in the league right now, is how do you take the guy who is Mr. Irrelevant and make him into an MVP candidate? And the answer is not he doesn't actually do anything. It's Kyle understands that Brock Purdy is extremely smart. And that's why he wanted him, by the way, in the draft. It wasn't an accident they drafted him. And so they put a ton on him mentally. Lots of formations, lots of motions. There's all these different personnel groupings. It's hey, man, you're going to have to study your ass off. But after the ball's snapped, it's going to be easy for you, because we're going to use all this stuff to make it easier physically, even though there's a ton to do mentally. And I feel that's the area where this system and the way it's designed. And by the way, there's also personnel discussions to be had here in terms of it, the way that the Eagles have made things easier for Jalen Hurts over the last couple of years is their offensive line's incredible. So he doesn't necessarily have to worry about pressure ever. Right. So there's different ways to go about it. But for the play calling, schematic type of stuff, they have simplified this offense to the point that it is oversimple. It's that's actually not training wheels. It actually is harder, where it's Aaron Rodgers could run this system because he sees through everything. Right. Rodgers notoriously just doesn't want a lot of motion, doesn't want a lot of stuff. He's let's line up and play football because I'm better at playing football than they are. Right. And at this point in his career, Sam Howell can't say that. And most quarterbacks can never say that. So do you actually give him more in order to make it easier on him? That is the kind of the question that I've had all year, and they have not ever been able to take that next step. And thus Sam is kind of staying where he's at, and the production is falling off because defenses seemingly have known that for weeks.
Yeah. And so I think San Fran is an interesting example, because I think there is some truth to what you're saying, but also Brock Purdy's playing pretty good football right now.
Yeah, Brock's playing great football.
It's he's elevating. I think 70% of the time Kyle's elevating, and then that 30% he's elevating. But I think another example, to your point, I think that's a good example. But I can hear
Detroit to me is my favorite example, because
Detroit, Seattle is doing that. Cleveland with Joe Flacco. There are teams, and when you watch those games, what they do in terms of deleveraging, right? The term game manager, I think, is thrown out in a negative way, but I think it speaks to what this commenter is saying is you got to play NFL quarterback at some point. I don't have to play NFL quarterback all the time. When I think about hard situations for quarterbacks, it's we're in the gun. It's 3rd and 7. I got a deal. How do I manage those situations to make them easier? And so you mentioned the Kyle example, I think about how they scheme stuff open and how they use play action pass to help guys out. So just as an example, right? Hard play action, right? We talked about this, and I think EB did this in the game. There's examples of this, but let's talk about that. Hard play action pass look, right? Those linebackers step up. There's a big void there, but how do we ensure that the corner's not going to get in the way, right? We're going to run Deebo Samuel on a go, and he's going to carry, and then George Kittle's going to run across the formation and be wide open with nobody around him. How many times have we watched a highlight of George just wide open in space? It's
right. Because he's George Kittle. Don't you know that he's important? Cover him, but you can't because you're covering everybody else.
It's because they've taken time and they've schemed stuff up, and Brock Purdy knows it. He feels comfortable with it. And so, for example, on that dig to Terry, that's a good schemed up touch there. Like that should be an easy completion for Terry. But Sam, and this is something that someone I was talking to mentioned to me, and this is something you have to talk to Sam about, is you mentioned that he has not been super efficient from a play action pass standpoint. And one of the things I wonder about is how well he can see it from a play action pass standpoint. So like the throw's open, it's there. The window that EB has created with the pen is there. It's just, there's a little bit of pressure. He gets a little bit spooked and the ball's not out. So even though with the pen you seemingly elevated, the result isn't there. And so getting back to the leverage thing, it's like, how do you find opportunities to just limit those big time moments in the game? Like I think Seattle does a great job because they're super efficient at running the football, right? They've a lot of tight ends on the field. They're physical. It's like this exotic smash mouth thing that Detroit does where they're motioning tight ends around. They're moving guys around the formation. They're changing strength all the time, and they're putting defense in a blender, and they're really efficient running the football. Like they've deleveraged Drew Lock. They've deleveraged Geno Smith through that element of the game. It doesn't need to be through the run game, but it is a feature of it, right? I look at Matthew Stafford and the LA Rams. Like they rush for, what was it, 125 yards or something like that?
It was more than that, yeah.
And what they do, man, it's brilliant. It's just like, but those little wrinkles in the run game deleverage Matthew Stafford. Like Matthew Stafford can deal. There's no doubt about it. But he doesn't need to deal every single play because I don't want to put all my eggs in the quarterback basket. And so even though Matthew Stafford's playing some of the best football in the NFL at the quarterback position right now, Sean McVay understands that, hey, we got to take something off of him. And it's not just off of him, it's off the offensive line as well. So I think that's kind of like what we're alluding to here is just there are ways to say to put him in a better spot. Like I like the example you gave, like where he's riding the bike himself, right? But you're right there with him holding the seat. I think that's exactly what you're saying. The training wheels aren't on because we want to run NFL offense. We want to do what we need to do. But I am helping you as much as you need to make sure this thing stays upright and we're going in the right direction.
Right. And so, but there also does get to a point in defense of Eric and in, if you want to call it criticism of Sam, where like eventually you got to do it. Right. And this is where, and it might not be even a criticism of Sam. Like, I mean, this is Tavita Pritchard's first time as an NFL quarterbacks coach. Like, who knows what kind of, how the process has gone. Like, I'm just naming names to say, like, we don't know where the blame actually goes. Right. But from a like identifying the process standpoint, watching the film standpoint, like, why aren't Sam's eyes going to that backside safety to double check that he doesn't need to throw the go to Terry before getting to the front side concept? Did Sam forget that that's what he's supposed to do because he's focused on the front side concept? Did they teach him like, hey man, just focus on this front side concept? It's too, like, we don't want to cloud your brain with that backside safety and you miss an opportunity because that's the way it's coached? Are they not focusing enough on like how he moves his eyes? Like, does Sam not have like that global understanding that like, hey, I have to check this first, or did he just miss it? Like, there's almost an infinite amount of possibilities of why this stuff is happening, but I think it's very clear that there isn't that like really high level understanding, and there's been, I think, I'm trying to think of the word. There's just like a lack of cohesion, I think is the best way to phrase it, between Sam and this offense, which is not to blame Sam or the offense. It's just a fact. Like, they haven't fit together very well. I think part of that too is going back to some of the things that he really needed to work on coming into the season, footwork and timing. This is a footwork and timing offense. And you've got a quarterback who, like, I watch him take the snap sometimes and he kind of like freezes and then he rushes the drop back. And you're like, that's not how that is supposed to look. And you watch Jacoby take his dropbacks, and it's like smoothly catch the snap, boom, 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 back foot hits, ball is out, or hitch, ball is out. But like, there is a rhythm to his eyes and his feet and the offense, and everything is married together. And I don't see that cohesion, to use that word again, with Sam. And the why is, I mean, it's important for them to know. I just think it's kind of impossible for us to know unless you have unless you've actually unlocked the answers, and now I've just rambled far too long.
No.
You've been sitting here with the knowledge the whole time.
No. But I do think that you mentioned the rhythm and timing, like that's a big part of it, and that's really hard to coach because it's like a feel, And I think in the NFL, that rhythm and timing becomes so much more important because everything, like you said, is kind of operating in such, like, the margin for error is so small. So if my feet are too fast and I'm waiting to throw, then my clock goes off and the receiver's not even in a position where he can catch the football. If I'm too slow, the receiver's open and I'm still holding on to the football. And then I think, when you watch Jacoby, just the rhythm that he, like you mentioned the rhythm. I'm in my drop, there's a rhythm. I've hitched in the same rhythm as the receivers coming out, right? And it wasn't like Jacoby was perfect. There was one time where he was trying to like work an attack concept and the tight end's over the ball, and he's trying to hold the hook player by looking at Curtis, and the hook player squeezes to Logan. It's not there, and he kind of double clutches to Logan, but gets back to Curtis. Like that's the O-line wins that down for him, because it's even though his rhythm and timing was off. So I'm not saying like Jacoby was perfect, but
sure,
that's something that you can tell at the moment Sam's having a hard time with. And I think the thing that's hard to like in the evaluation of Sam, because that's really what this conversation's about, is there are some things he's struggling with. There are some things all young quarterbacks struggle with. The thing that still gets me excited about Sam is his playmaking ability. Like we just mentioned that he misses the dig, to Terry, but he scrambles for a first down. So even though that's a bad play, like it's like kind of a minus, like he was able to elevate that and keep the offense on the field, right? There's the 3rd and 15 where he scrambles for 12 or 13 yards and gets you to a 4th and 2, right? We talked about the mesh concept where, the back's running wide open. And I'm as a coach, I'm a little frustrated with that because of how I've set that.
The 4th down that he winds up scrambling and converts to Terry, Jonathan Williams is buck naked open, so open for a touchdown on a wheel route. But he makes a ridiculous play to Terry to convert a 4th down. How mad can you be?
Yeah. And so I think like what I would say is if I'm coaching this, I'm like, good job making the play. But just remember, in this look with the back offset to your right and 53 in the A gap, and they're in man coverage here because you can tell it's man coverage, he has to cover him. So when he doesn't leave with the back, I'm alerting that in my mind, right? Because that's the person that's going to match him. And so he's trying to hold a disguise. They don't get it communicated. It's essentially a coverage bust, right? Because as that linebacker is trying to late get to match the back, he gets picked by Logan Thomas. He gets picked by Curtis Samuel, and he's wide open. So as a coach, I'm saying, hey, man, great job making this play, but I think you made it a little too hard on yourself. Just pre-snap, like what's your pre-snap read? And I think this is something that's really hard. The pre-snap stuff now in the NFL is harder than ever. Like, even in me talking about the coverages, I'm like, looks like 6, could be man, maybe a match. You sent me your
notes. There's a lot of question marks on the coverage. And that's what happens with zone match. And like Raheem Morris is one of the best guys in the league at coaching this stuff up, the Rams defensive coordinator. And it looks messy because it starts as one thing and kind of morphs into something else. It's really hard, which makes the rules of like, if it's 6 throw here, if it's 3 throw here, right, you don't know what it is. And that, I would, again, and anybody who's newer to the podcast, if you want to hear more about this, go back to the summer in our archive and or just search the Matt Ryan podcast, because Matt talked about this, of how hard it became by the end of his career to read coverage, and you kind of had to start reading space. And there were times that he made great plays having no idea what coverage he just threw into.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that gets me is like, can you ensure the space as a coordinator, right, to help him out, right? I think it's what we're ultimately getting at is, can you help him with that process as opposed to just being like, hey, man, we're going to pre-snap read this, and you're going to have to figure it out. So back to the Sam thing, there are those plays. The touchdown, I think, is a great play design. The one to is it to Curtis?
It's Curtis, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great play design. It's curl, so you're going to run out, you're going to run like a curl route. Everyone knows a curl button hook, maybe some people call it. 12 yard sit. The cover 3 player is going to attach to that. You're going to inside stem, and you're going to run a deep corner, and you're running a corner on a safety, and it's wide open. And I love that play. It's a great play call, great situation, great understanding by EB. But talk about ensuring space. Like it's an easy read. Like second that guy attaches to the button hook, to the curl, I know I'm throwing the pylon. Like there's nobody out there to cover it. So I just love that opportunity. And again, Sam does that stuff pretty consistently, but there were times definitely where you're like, he doesn't know the coverage. He's a little bit rattled. He's leaving clean pockets. And that's the thing that you're dealing with, because I do think you see the potential. And I think, we always make the Jalen Hurts comparison. There were times watching Jalen Hurts where I thought this is a non-tenable solution. It's a non-tenable solution for him playing NFL quarterback. He's throwing 3 picks. Nothing's on schedule. He's running into sacks. But he got better. And I think you've seen enough of Sam being Sam in terms of arm talent, because like his arm talent, in my opinion, is way better than Jalen Hurts. His release is way better. And you've seen the competitive moxie that he brings. So year 2 development. And so that's where like everyone talks about, oh, do we need to draft a quarterback? Do we need to make a move in free agency? I think you're probably okay. This game doesn't, after watching the all 22, doesn't get me off of him just yet. I think there's enough there, but I think it's kind of to your point. It's like, he
needs a much more quarterback friendly system and environment, right? It's not just a system. It's not just a coordinator thing. It's like he needs an elite offensive line. He probably needs a great tight end to throw to. Like those things helped Jalen as much as anything.
Well, I think, even looking at Drew Lock, like watch that game last night, and like in the crunch time, it's like, I've got guys that are better than your guys and we're going to win. Like DK Metcalf's going to make a great play here. And we got Jackson Smith and Jigba making a huge play, winning a man-to-man situation. And I think Terry has that ability. I think Jahan's had that ability, but maximizing those guys in this offense is also something, you'd like to see a little bit more of, or maybe featuring them a little bit more. Cause I think the offense has given them opportunities, and Sam has not always hit on those opportunities. And again, that's in every offense. That's not just this offense with Sam. Like that happens frequently as the quarterbacks miss stuff. They're not on the same page with the receivers. It is a new offense. But yeah, so I think like it hasn't got me off him yet, but I do think it shows you that he's a work in progress. He's a developmental piece. And again, like I think he's got it, but you're going to have to deal with some growing pains with it.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, or one of the things that Jalen has on Sam is accuracy. He was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the country in college at both Alabama and at Oklahoma, and he carried that. Wasn't always going the right place, whatever, but his accuracy has always been a huge boon for him. And Sam, that has been an issue at times. So I think the footwork, the accuracy are two of the biggest questions about Howell coming out of college. Those things are still question marks right now. He's still a young player. He's growing, and we'll see based off how he performs in these final 3 games and what the next regime wants to do, whether that's enough to be the quarterback in 2024. Anything else on the offense we want to get to before we quickly buzz through the defense?
No, I mean, unless there's other plays you want to go over, but I think that's good.
No, I mean, we can talk later in the week about the offensive line and some of that kind of stuff. But I think that was the most 30 minutes of quarterback talk is exactly what the people ordered here on the Film Review Pod. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. All right, a few minutes quickly on the defense, Logan. It was better. Better is a relative term. What did you see watching the All-22, what they were able to do against the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously better is a relative term, but I do think it was better. I think guys just seem to be playing more confidently. They seem to know kind of where they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to fit stuff, how they're supposed to pass stuff off. Obviously, there's the exception with that, with the Cooper Kupp touchdown, and even the touchdown to number 15 for LA.
DeMarcus Robinson.
Yeah, DeMarcus Robinson. You get Percy kind of expecting a high cross, kind of turns his hips, bounces back. It's actually the exact same play that Washington scored their touchdown on, is that kind of curl holding the outside corner to a high pylon. So, but I think on a down-to-down basis, I think, you watch a guy like Cody Barton, and I know people want to hate on Cody Barton, but I think him being back in the lineup has been great. Like there's times where he's getting under deep dig throws off of play action, forcing Matthew Stafford to hold the football, forcing him to check the ball down. Like, great job by him. I think, Quan is not a perfect player, but I loved in this game his physicality, like his physical approach. Like, I was always concerned that he didn't have like the kind of mindset to play that Buffalo nickel in the box kind of safety. And I think he emphatically said, like, I do, man. I'm going to take on an offensive lineman. I'm going to take on receivers cracking me. I'm going to be physical. I'm going to make tackles. I'm going to get messy. And again, like, it's not perfect because he misfits some runs and did some stuff that was crazy, but I love to see that. I thought Khalil Hudson absolutely played like a maniac, like he's running the football. He's being super bendy, making plays. So I thought there was stuff where you're like, man, like this is really good. There's times in the red zone. I think that was the other thing that stood out to me, was where they've got the coverage lined up. There's no spot to go with the football. And unlike times earlier this season where you're like, man, there's like 5 or 6 places this guy could go with the ball for a touchdown.
And that places, and there's 5 eligibles. How did that happen?
And like, and that wasn't the case, playing good coverage in the red zone, getting pressures and sacks down there. I still think it was nice to see kind of Allen and Payne come to life a little bit from a pass rush standpoint. And I think I think that was great to see. Again, you want more from them specifically, but that group in general, just kind of creating more consistent pass rush and flushing guys out. And
edge,
again,
not a lot of pressures from the edge.
Yeah, and again, that's tough because in these game flow situations, you're looking for obvious rush situations. So I understand that it's not perfect, but also you don't have Montez Sweat and Chase Young out there anymore. I thought Benjamin St. Juste did some good stuff, from a coverage standpoint, man-to-man, pressing guys. Again, the coverage bust to Cooper Kupp. It'd be interesting to see, after the game, he commented and said that there's a couple ways they could have played that. But they didn't.
So there's two ways we could have played it, and we played it differently. So basically, the two ways are Benjamin St. Juste could have stayed back as the deep thirds player, or Cam Curl could have carried, which is exactly what we said on our post-game pod. Maybe we do know what we're talking about sometimes. That Cam Curl as the outside hook player could carry, or the flat player in that four underneath could carry that wheel up the sideline, and neither happened. So yikes.
So I think that's kind of how I feel about it, and I think for all of the stuff that people say about Ron, the defense is playing better over the last 2 weeks. Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think it shows the other thing they did, which I loved, is, we talk about how that, that wheel route that Jamin Davis gave up to Saquon Barkley for a touchdown. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. So instead of just letting Khaleke Hudson match the back in a one-on-one situation, the defensive end chips the back on the way out. So that way Cam Curl can take away the seam, and then it doesn't matter because Khaleek's over the top. So just little things like that I thought were very nice. It's
almost like when we say hey, that's tough sledding for Jamin Davis, they can help him out, that we, again, might know what we're talking about. And that perhaps it's not just Jamin Davis sucks because he can't run with Saquon Barkley. It's no kidding.
Yeah, a lot of people can't do that. So
I don't know really who can. Frankly, Fred Warner, and that's the list.
I mean, even Fred, I'd be like,
that's a tough one for Fred. Yeah, I'd if I got that matchup and I'm Tommy DeVito,
giving it a look, giving it a look,
giving it a little look. I mean, I think that's all great. And it's great in the context of this game. It's so maddening because you're just like, why didn't you make this change after the Chicago game? It does make you go back, and I understand that it would have been. And I think at the time we were like, man, that's tough because it just is. They don't really have the staff to get this done. They don't have the infrastructure to support this kind of change. And at some point you just have to find it. You just have to be like, you know what? Screw it. We got to, or be like, hey, Jack, we're doing it my way now. We're gonna change this stuff up. Ron's been here the whole time. So I'm glad that they found this stuff, and it's gonna make for better, cleaner evaluations over the final 4 games. But it does kind of make you smack your head against a wall and go, well, could they have more wins if they had done some of this stuff sooner?
It kind of feels that way. You know what I mean? This offense is pretty good, and I think that I think the one thing that was a little disappointing was the run stuff,
the run
obviously.
Defense, for sure. And I think you also see how you can leverage a successful run game into easy completions, because Stafford did start the game 9 for 9, 10 for 10, whatever it wound up being.
Right.
So they were able to get stuff, but it wasn't like he was killing you down the field. And if you want to bend but don't break, they showed how you do it. They really were able to put up stops in a game where their offense gave them zero support, and in fact put them, offense and special teams, put them in terrible spots. And the fact that they were only down 13-0 at half with how the offense, and then the bad snaps, and specifically the last bad snap that nearly got Tress killed and put them on the, in the red zone. That's incredible job by the defense against this offense. Unfortunately, that was the reality of where they were. But I think it starts with the kind of the bending that happens starts with the run game.
No, I think that's exactly right. And again, they're trying to play a coverage. They're emphasizing coverage structure, right? So you're a little bit short in the run game, but I do think at least to my eye, Cam Curl, Percy Butler, Quan, to a certain extent, they were not ready for the blocking of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. You could tell at times they were surprised, and you can see how they were able to leverage those receivers to create good angles. And again, there's times where, for example, they basically run it's a really cool idea, and we're going to get a little nerdy here because we were talking about defense. Basically they counter motion Cooper Kupp, and they use him like a fullback to run weak lead. Think about ISO, but he's the ISO guy, and the reason it works is because he's ISOing on a nickel player, right? So it's our receiver is a better blocker than your guy. And Quan absolutely chins this dude. So good job, Quan. But I thought like that's a really easy way to make sure you get good angles with receivers and get lighter personnel on the field. Don't let Big John Ridgeway out there in Cinco. Like, let's make sure we're all. And so I thought like in terms of offensive innovation, in terms of run game, we saw how Miami did it. And here we're seeing how LA's doing it with a very different kind of skill set and a very different quarterback situation. But again, innovative run stuff and how, again, it takes some of the pressure off the quarterback. And so outside of the run game, I think everybody played physical football. You see John Ridgeway playing hard. Mathis, again, has a hard time getting reached in certain situations, which is super frustrating. But I think just the effort of like Khalil Hudson and some of these guys, KJ Henry did some good stuff. Again, there's times where he's getting bullied a little bit, but everybody had their moments in the game. So I don't know. I think it is an interesting thought experiment, though, to think if they had made some of these changes, when Montez was here or when Chase was here, how this would look defensively. Because one of the things that I will say is like, I think the rush is okay, but imagine if those dudes were here in this more simplified defensive structure, like could the coverage in the back end elevate them, and would that sack production have been what it needed to be? And the other thing too, that I'm sorry I'm rambling a little bit here, is like St. Juste is playing way more confident. Like he's getting hands on guys, he's getting in throwing windows. Like they ran a zero pressure in the red zone on a 3rd and 10. It's the one where Payne got the penalty, but St. Juste is in perfect man position, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like, where has this dude been? Like this is who we thought he was. And so again, I think it just shows you how important coaching is, and how important it is to speak to what your players do well and make them play confident football. So,
yeah. The one dude, we're like, literally, where is he? Any idea why Emmanuel Forbes only played 6 snaps? That to me is a wacky bit.
I don't know.
Maybe he was hurt, and like maybe, I mean, obviously he's coming off the injury. Ron said something about like the matchups or whatever. But to me, if you can rotate your left guards, you can rotate Emmanuel Forbes in this football game. Like where you are in the season, that drove me insane.
Yeah, I think because again, we're trying to get evaluations. So
yeah, I know what Kendall Fuller is. I don't need to see. Not that you're not a better football team with Kendall Fuller on the field. That's not what this is about. I know what Kendall Fuller is. I don't need to see more Kendall Fuller. Like
that smells of something else is going on. Like they're not happy with how he's fitting runs. They're not happy with his. There's something's going on there.
Maybe they were concerned about him with the Rams receivers blocking him, and they just didn't like the matchup, and they felt they owed it to everyone to go out and try to win the game, and this was the best way to win the game. But I want to know, go surprise me. You're the 1st round pick, and you're 4-9, now 4-10. But what can you do? All right. We will preview the game with the Jets coming up later this week on the podcast. We are also scheduled to catch up with I think, William, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. I can see your preview off screen here. Reception Perception. We got him? Yeah. The Reception Perception podcast, which focuses on wide receivers. And they try to isolate wide receiver play from quarterback play. So, like, what kind of year is Jahan Dotson actually having? What kind of year is Terry McLaurin actually having? We're going to catch up with those guys later this week as well. So that'll be really, really cool. Another one of our great Odyssey podcasts here in the family. Until then, I'll see y'all on the radio. So you can catch me there weekdays 4 to 7 on the Team 980. Of course, make sure you check out everything Logan's doing. Logan_Paulson82 on Instagram, the Commander's YouTube channel, all of that stuff. And wherever you're watching or listening right now, if you have not subscribed yet, now would be a good time. Just go ahead and click the button, follow on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, whatever you do on Amazon Music. And of course, subscribe and like this video on YouTube. For Logan, I'm Craig. We'll see you later in the week on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.